The soft blue glow of artificial lighting reflected off the polished stone floor of the Galactic Council chambers. John Miller straightened his diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. After 15 years as Earth's ambassador to the Council, he had grown accustomed to the barely disguised contempt from the older species. Today, however, would be different. The massive circular chamber housed representatives from over 200 spacefaring civilizations. Humans, as relative newcomers to interstellar travel, were seated in the outer rings with other developing species. The central positions belonged to the founding five, races that had been exploring the stars when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. Karen Davis, Earth's strategic advisor, leaned toward John. "They've already made up their minds," she whispered. "The vote tallies were shared among the inner circle last night." John nodded slightly. "I know, but they still have to hear us out according to their own rules." The council speaker, a tall, willowy being named Zorash from the ancient Helvari race, rose from his seat. "We now address the resource allocation amendment to the Galactic Mining Treaty. All arguments have been heard over the previous 6 cycles. The council will now vote." John caught Karen's eye. They both knew what was coming. For the past decade, Earth had built its economy around mining operations within its own solar system. The amendment would classify certain minerals as galactic heritage resources, restricting human access while giving council-approved corporations, all owned by the older races, unlimited rights. The holographic tally appeared above the chamber floor. One by one, representatives pressed their voting devices. As expected, the result was overwhelming: 189 in favor, 23 opposed, 12 abstentions. Zorash's voice echoed through the chamber. "The amendment passes. Implementation begins within 1 standard rotation." John stood up. According to council protocol, the affected party had the right to make a formal statement after any vote. He walked calmly to the central speaking platform, aware of the dismissive glances from the inner circle representatives. "The delegation from Earth thanks the council for its consideration," John began, his voice steady. "As the official representative of humanity, I must inform this body that Earth cannot accept this amendment." A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Defiance was rare in council proceedings. Furthermore, John continued, "After careful review of council actions over the past 50 years, humanity has made the decision to formally withdraw from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The murmur turned into a wave of shocked voices. Zorash struck his ceremonial staff against the floor 3 times, calling for order. "Ambassador Miller," Zorash said, unable to hide his surprise, "this is highly irregular. Perhaps your species does not understand the implications." "We understand perfectly," John replied. "For 50 years, humanity has attempted to be a productive member of this council. For 50 years, we have been systematically marginalized, our concerns dismissed, our innovations exploited, and our sovereignty undermined." Karen Davis rose from her seat and joined John at the platform. She activated a small device that projected a holographic display visible to the entire chamber. "This is a record of 372 violations of established council treaties by member races against human interests," Karen said. "Each documented, verified, and submitted through proper channels. Each ignored or dismissed by council leadership." The chamber had fallen completely silent now. John continued, "Humanity did not reach the stars by accepting unfair terms or submitting to exploitation. We came here in good faith, but we will leave with our dignity intact." A representative from the Volturi Confederation, one of the inner circle races, laughed loudly. "And where will you go, humans? Your species relies on council trade routes, council technology, and council protection." John smiled slightly. "That's a common misconception, Representative. Humanity has never relied on the council. We chose to participate. There's a difference." He turned to address the entire chamber. "As of this moment, all human diplomats are being recalled from council worlds. All trade agreements with council entities are suspended. All human space is closed to council vessels until further notice." The Volturi representative stood up angrily. "This is absurd. You cannot simply withdraw from galactic civilization. We are not withdrawing from civilization, John clarified. We are withdrawing from this institution, which no longer serves its stated purpose of fair cooperation among species. A soft chime sounded from Karen's communicator. She glanced at it and nodded to John. Our transports are ready, Ambassador. Captain Andrew Clark, commander of the Human Diplomatic Security Detail, entered the chamber with 20 officers in formal uniform. They took positions around the human delegation. The Council will regret this display, Zarash said coldly. When your people face the realities of isolation, you will return on less favorable terms. John looked directly at the ancient alien. That's where you're wrong, Speaker. Humanity thrived alone for thousands of years. We will do so again, if necessary. As the human delegation prepared to leave, a representative from the Cathara, one of the younger council races, approached John. Ambassador Miller, she said quietly, many of us do not agree with how humans have been treated. This council has grown complacent and arrogant. John nodded. Then perhaps our absence will give you an opportunity to reform it. If that happens, we may speak again someday. Outside the council chambers, hundreds of human diplomats, trade representatives, and their families were already boarding ships. The withdrawal had been planned for months, triggered by the inevitable passage of the mining amendment. On the main diplomatic vessel, John joined Captain Clark on the bridge. Through the viewport, they could see the gleaming spires of Centauri Prime, the Council's capital world. All human personnel accounted for, Ambassador, Andrew reported. The embassy has been secured and all sensitive materials removed per protocol. Thank you, Captain, John replied. Take us home. As the ships prepared to depart, emergency communications began flooding in from council representatives, trade ministers, and corporate leaders, suddenly realizing the implications of humanity's exit. Karen Davis monitored the incoming messages. They're already panicking. The Telbrux Corporation is offering to renegotiate their technology exchange program. The Veldari embassy is requesting an urgent meeting. John watched as the planet grew smaller through the viewport. No responses for now. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The fleet of human ships accelerated away from Centauri Prime, their engines glowing bright against the darkness of space. Do you think they'll learn from this? Andrew asked. John considered the question. Eventually. But first, they'll try to punish us. They'll try to prove they don't need us. Only when that fails will they begin to understand. As the ships prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel, John looked at the final image of the Council world on the view screen. For 50 years, humanity had tried to find its place among the stars by following the rules of older civilizations. Now they would forge their own path. Signal Earth, he told the communications officer. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. The stars stretched into lines of light as the ships jumped to FTL, leaving behind a council already beginning to realize what they had lost. 3 weeks after humanity's departure from the Galactic Council, Earth's solar system buzzed with activity. Ships that once carried goods to distant worlds now moved between planets and orbital stations with new purpose. On Earth, in the sprawling complex of the Geneva Diplomatic Headquarters, Laura Bennett reviewed the latest reports on her tablet. As Secretary of Interstellar Commerce, Laura had spent years keeping track of every trade agreement, technology exchange, and resource deal between humans and alien species. Now she was overseeing their systematic termination. How many remaining contracts do we have with the Veldari? She asked her assistant. 17 major agreements and 43 minor ones, he replied. Their ambassador has sent 15 urgent messages since yesterday. Laura nodded. And the Cathara? Only 12 agreements total. They were one of the few council races that voted against the mining amendment. Laura made a note on her tablet. Put the Cathara on the potential future partners list. They showed good judgment. Across the solar system, on the moon base that served as Earth's military headquarters, Captain Kevin Peters guided a group of officers through a secure door that hadn't been opened to most military personnel until now. Welcome to the Real Orbital Defense Network Control Center, Kevin said as lights activated automatically. Holographic displays sprang to life. showing a complex web of satellites, platforms, and hidden weapon systems surrounding not just Earth, but every human colony. Most of this was built under cover of regular satellite maintenance or scientific research stations, Kevin explained. The Council thought our defense capabilities were limited to the 40 systems they approved. In reality, we have over 400. One of the officers whistled softly. How did we keep this hidden? Kevin smiled. The Council races think humans are simple and transparent. They never imagined we could maintain secrecy on this scale. He tapped a control, and the display shifted to show the status of defensive systems around Mars, Europa, and the outer mining colonies. Phase 2 activation is complete. Any unauthorized vessel approaching human space will be warned, then disabled if they don't withdraw. Meanwhile, in the presidential office in Washington, D.C., Paul Martinez sat with Susan Wright, Director of Human Intelligence. The office was secure against any form of surveillance, allowing them to speak freely. The Council is in disarray, Susan reported. None of them expected a complete withdrawal. They thought we would make a symbolic protest, then accept their terms as we've done in the past. President Martinez steepled his fingers. And the extraction of our people from Council territories. Nearly complete, Susan replied. We've also evacuated 97% of the human sympathizers who requested assistance. The remaining few should be out within days. Good. And our operations in Council space? Susan handed him a secure tablet. Our deep cover agents remain in place. They'll keep us informed of developments while maintaining their covers. The president nodded. The Council believes we've isolated ourselves, cutting off all contact with galactic society. They don't understand that we're simply cutting off contact with them. Across the galaxy, the effects of humanity's withdrawal were beginning to ripple through Council society. On the Jorat homeworld, Medical Center Director Grohl faced a crisis as diagnostic equipment began shutting down. What do you mean they're not working? He demanded of his technical staff. These machines were certified by Council inspectors just last cycle. The chief technician looked nervous. The systems require regular software updates from the human company that designed them. Without those updates, the advanced diagnostic functions are failing one by one. Then contact the company. We've tried. All communications to human space are being blocked. The few messages that get through receive an automated response. Due to the withdrawal of humanity from the Galactic Council, this service is no longer available. Similar scenes played out across thousands of worlds as technologies that Council races had come to rely on, often without acknowledging their human origin, began to degrade or fail entirely. On Earth, Kevin Peters met with Laura Bennett to coordinate the next phase of their strategy. The defensive grid is fully active, Kevin reported. We've already turned away 17 Council vessels that attempted to enter our space. Laura nodded. Good. On the economic front, we've terminated all official agreements with Council entities. We're now beginning selective engagement with individual non-Council worlds. How are the Council races responding? Exactly as expected. First disbelief, then anger, now the beginning of worry. She smiled slightly. The Telbrux Corporation has offered triple the previous rates for human engineering consultants. Kevin laughed. Did you tell them no amount of money would change our position? I didn't tell them anything. Silence is more effective than any message we could send. In the outskirts of the Sol system, a sleek observation vessel maintained, positioned just outside the new boundary markers. Inside, Michelle Robinson, a human diplomat who had specialized in Council affairs, watched incoming data streams with interest. Though officially all human representatives had been withdrawn, Michelle and a small team had been assigned to secretly monitor Council activities. They're holding an emergency session, she noted as encrypted data flowed across her screen. Third, one this week. Her colleague nodded. The Veldari and Zorat representatives nearly came to blows during the last one. Without human mediators, old rivalries are resurfacing. Michelle made notes in her secure log. The Council spent centuries building a system that worked for the founding races. They never truly integrated the younger species, just expected us to fit into their framework. She zoomed in on financial data from major Council worlds. Markets were showing increasing instability as trade routes that had relied on human ships and ports scrambled to reorganize. President Martinez was right, Michelle said quietly. They never saw us as equals, so they never bothered to understand how deeply integrated humans had become in the galactic economy. Back on Earth, Paul Martinez prepared to address the human population. Billions would watch as he explained the new reality of humanity's place in the galaxy. Standing before the camera, he projected calm confidence. Citizens of Earth and all human colonies, 1 month ago, our representatives withdrew from the Galactic Council after years of unfair treatment and exploitation. Today, I can report that our transition to independence has been smooth and successful. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The Council believed we needed them more than they needed us. They are now discovering their mistake. Our borders are secure, our economy is stable, our technology continues to advance without Council restrictions. Across human space, people watched with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Some have asked if we have isolated ourselves from the galaxy. The president continued. The answer is no. We have simply stepped back from an organization that no longer serves our interests. Already several non-council worlds have reached out to establish direct relations with humanity. He smiled slightly. The stars remain open to us. We will continue to explore, to trade, and to build relationships, but on our terms, as equals, not as second-class members of an outdated hierarchy. As the president concluded his address, a council diplomatic vessel approached the edge of human space. It carried urgent messages from several inner circle representatives, suddenly eager to discuss misunderstandings. The ship was politely, but firmly turned away by human border forces. The council would need to learn patience. Humanity had waited 50 years for respect. The galaxy could wait a little longer for humanity's return. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council. What had begun as an inconvenience for the council races had evolved into a crisis that grew worse each day. In the Grand Council chamber that once housed representatives from over 200 species, nearly 40 seats now stood empty. The Cathara had been the first to leave, followed by several other younger races who had suffered similar treatment to humans. Gregory Adams watched the proceedings from a special observation booth. As the only Zalarian who had dedicated his life to studying human culture, he had been summoned by the council to provide insight. The irony wasn't lost on him. After decades of ignoring his warnings about underestimating humans, they now desperately sought his expertise. You must understand, Gregory explained to the inner circle representatives who had gathered in a private chamber after the main session. Humans don't think like the founding races. When they withdraw, it isn't a negotiating tactic. They genuinely stepped away. Zorash, the council speaker, made a dismissive gesture. Every species uses the same strategies. They create a problem to gain leverage. Gregory shook his head. That's exactly the misconception that brought us here. Humans warned you for 50 years that they were being marginalized. You ignored them. They left. Now you're facing the consequences. On the main council floor, representatives from the Veldari and Zorat empires were engaged in a heated argument. What had begun as a minor trade dispute had escalated dramatically without the human-designed negotiation systems that had quietly resolved thousands of similar conflicts in the past. Your ships violated our territory 6 times in the past month, the Veldari ambassador shouted. We were following established routes that have been used for centuries, the Zorat representative countered. From her hidden observation post in an asteroid at the edge of council space, Michelle Robinson recorded the exchange. For 6 months, she had documented the council's decline, compiling data for Earth's historical records. Another border dispute, she noted in her log. That makes 17 major conflicts since our withdrawal. The interesting pattern is that most involved trade routes or resources that had human involvement. Her monitoring systems detected a transmission on a frequency that hadn't been used in months. It was heavily encrypted, but the signature was unmistakable. A message from a Teldari ship, using an old human diplomatic code. She quickly relayed the information to Earth. Within hours, she received clearance to establish cautious contact. The Teldari Federation, one of the major council races, was secretly reaching out to humans. Along the borders of human space, Commander Eric Johnson maintained a careful watch. His fleet patrolled the boundaries, observing but never engaging the council ships that periodically tested their defenses. Another Volturi scout at Sector 7, his sensor officer reported. Third one this week. Eric nodded. Same as the others. Let them observe our regular patrols, but nothing more. They're looking for weaknesses or signs of technological regression. Sir, they've been coming for months. Shouldn't we warn them off more forcefully? Eric smiled. No. Our restraint tells them more than our weapons ever could. They expect us to be aggressive or desperate. Our patience confuses them. On Earth, Diane Taylor led a team of scientists and engineers who were taking full advantage of humanity's new freedom from council restrictions. In a vast laboratory complex, technologies that had been deemed too advanced for human development by council standards were now progressing rapidly. The quantum communication system is ready for system-wide testing, one of her team leaders reported. Without council restrictions, we've made 10 years of progress in 6 months. Diane nodded with satisfaction. Begin the test phase tomorrow. If successful, we'll implement it across all human territories within 3 months. Another scientist approached with a tablet displaying results from a different project. The medical nanites have passed all safety trials. They're ready for limited deployment. Excellent. Prioritize the outer colonies. They've had limited access to advanced medical care due to council restrictions. Across human space, similar advances were taking place in areas that had long been artificially held back by council regulations. Artificial intelligence, propulsion systems, weapons technology, and terraforming. Free from external control, human innovation was flourishing. Meanwhile, on dozens of council worlds, critical systems were beginning to fail. The Zorat Medical Center director, who had first noticed problems with his diagnostic equipment, now faced a complete shutdown of his life support systems. We need human technicians, he shouted at the council representative who had come to assess the situation. These systems were designed by human engineers. Our people don't understand how to maintain them. The council is working on a solution, the representative said stiffly. We have our own experts developing replacements. That could take years. We have patients who will die in days. Similar emergencies were unfolding across council space. Transportation networks, communication grids, power distribution systems, all had incorporated human technology over the decades, often without proper acknowledgement. Without human maintenance and updates, they were gradually breaking down. In a secure chamber on Earth, President Paul Martinez met with his cabinet to review the latest intelligence from council space. The situation is developing exactly as we predicted, Susan Wright reported. The council races are discovering just how dependent they became on human innovation and maintenance. And the secret approach from the Teldari? The president asked. Verified as genuine, Susan confirmed. They're requesting bilateral relations outside council oversight. 2 other major races have made similar overtures through various back channels. Laura Bennett, who had completed the termination of all council trade agreements, presented her assessment. From an economic standpoint, we're seeing exactly what we expected. The initial shock to our economy has stabilized. Some sectors are actually performing better without council restrictions. The president nodded thoughtfully. And what about the non-council worlds that have requested trade relations? We've established agreements with 17 independent systems, Laura replied, all on equal terms with fair exchange protocols. Kevin Peters provided the security update. Our defensive systems remain uncompromised. We've detected several attempts to probe our networks, but nothing has gotten through. And the withdrawal of the younger races from the council? The president asked. Susan Wright displayed a holographic map showing political alignments throughout the galaxy. 7 species have formally left the council so far. 5 more are expected to announce their withdrawal within the month. Most have expressed interest in establishing direct relations with humanity. Paul Martinez studied the map. So the council is splintering along age lines. The ancient races cling to their power, while the younger ones seek new alliances. Exactly, Susan confirmed. Humanity's departure was the catalyst, but the tensions have existed for centuries. At the edge of human space, the first official diplomatic meeting since the withdrawal was about to take place. A small human vessel approached the neutral meeting point where a Teldari ship waited. Daniel Lewis, a diplomatic liaison specially chosen for this mission, prepared to make first contact with a council race seeking reconciliation. His instructions were clear: listen, but make no promises. Humanity was in a position of strength for the first time. As the ships established communication, Daniel received a message from Earth. Remember, we are no longer supplicants. We are equals. Act accordingly. The Teldari representative appeared on the view screen, his expression a mixture of pride and desperation. On behalf of the Teldari Federation, I extend greetings to humanity. Recent events have prompted us to reconsider our position on certain matters. Daniel nodded politely. The human government is willing to listen. What do you propose? The galaxy was changing, the council was fracturing, and humanity, by simply walking away, had initiated a power shift that no military action could have achieved. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. What had begun as small cracks in the Council's unity had grown into deep fractures that threatened the entire institution. 3 major conflicts now raged across formerly peaceful sectors of space, with council races turning against each other in ways not seen for millennia. Admiral Scott Wilson stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Guardian, observing a distant battle between Veldari and Zorat forces from a safe distance. His orders were clear: document everything but maintain absolute neutrality. Are we recording all of this? He asked his sensor officer. Yes, Admiral, full spectrum data collection on all engagements. This is the 3rd major battle this month. Scott shook his head. All this over mining rights in a system neither of them even settled. His communications officer turned from her station. Admiral, we're receiving another distress signal. Civilian transport caught in the crossfire. Scott considered his options. Humanity had maintained strict non-intervention in council affairs, but they had made one exception: humanitarian aid for innocent civilians. Plot an intercept course, he ordered. Prepare rescue shuttles. No weapons, just evacuation teams. As the Earthship moved toward the damaged civilian transport, both warring parties temporarily ceased fire. Neither wanted to risk engaging humans directly, especially after reports of Earth's technological advancements had spread throughout the galaxy. On Earth, a presidential transition had recently taken place. Janet Brown, the new president, reviewed the latest reports from across human space in the Oval Office. Our observation vessels have documented 27 distinct armed conflicts in former Council territories, her military advisor reported. None have directly threatened human interests, yet but the instability is spreading. Janet nodded thoughtfully. And our humanitarian corridors? Operating at capacity, we've evacuated over 2 million refugees from conflict zones. Most have been relocated to neutral worlds, though some have requested asylum in human space. Patricia Garcia, the economic strategist who had replaced Laura Bennett, presented her data next. The Selective Engagement Initiative has been more successful than we anticipated. Direct trade with individual worlds has increased our economic output by 37%, compared to pre-withdrawal levels. Which proves what we suspected all along, Janet said. The Council was actively suppressing human economic potential. Daniel Lewis, who had been conducting secret negotiations with moderate Council factions, shared his latest findings. 17 former Council races have now formally requested bilateral relations with humanity. Perhaps more significantly, even, some of the Inner Circle species are sending back-channel communications. Out of desperation? Janet asked. Partly, Daniel admitted. But there's a growing faction among the older races who recognize that the Council's treatment of younger species was fundamentally flawed. Some are genuinely interested in a more equitable relationship. Janet considered this information. The question is, are we ready to re-engage? And if so, under what terms? Outside Council space, A remarkable transformation had taken place in human territories. Free from restrictions on research and development, human innovation had accelerated dramatically. Colonies that had once struggled under council quotas now thrived. Earth's solar system had been transformed with massive engineering projects that would have required decades of council approvals to implement. Diane Taylor, head of research and development, guided a group of visitors through Earth's newest scientific complex. The visitors weren't human. They were representatives from the Cathara and other species that had withdrawn from the council following humanity's example. This medical technology would have been classified as too advanced for non-founder species under council regulations, Diane explained, showing them a chamber where nanites repaired cellular damage in a patient. We developed it in 18 months once the restrictions were lifted. One of the alien visitors, a Cathara scientist, studied the equipment with interest. The council told us that humans were too impulsive to be trusted with advanced technology. Yet you've made more progress in 2 years than the council races made in the last century. Diane smiled. The council feared our rate of advancement. That's why they created so many regulations to slow us down. On the edges of what had once been unified council space, Commander Eric Johnson's border fleet had grown into a formidable force. His ships no longer simply patrolled. They now escorted humanitarian vessels and maintained safe corridors for civilian traffic between conflicted areas. Eric reviewed the latest intelligence reports in his command center. The Jorat Veldari, conflict has spilled over into the Proxima sector. We need to adjust our humanitarian routes accordingly. His second-in-command nodded. Yes, sir. Should we inform the council monitoring station? No, Eric replied. They've ignored our last 7 communications. They're still pretending they don't need our help while their territories burn. In the increasingly empty council chambers, Gregory Adams, the Zalarian anthropologist who studied humans, addressed the remaining representatives. Only about half the original members still attended council sessions regularly. You still don't understand what happened, he told them, his frustration evident. Humans didn't withdraw as a negotiating tactic. They withdrew because the system was fundamentally unfair. Yet they've been interfering in council affairs, a Volturi representative objected. Their ships are present in conflict zones. Rescuing civilians, Gregory corrected. While council warships focus on fighting each other, humans are the only ones protecting innocent bystanders. He displayed data showing refugee movements throughout the galaxy. 2 million people saved by human evacuation efforts. Meanwhile, the council has failed to implement a single effective peacekeeping mission. Back on Earth, Janet Brown met with her full cabinet to make a historic decision. 2 years of observation and careful planning had led to this moment. The council is failing, she stated simply. What was once the governing body of most of the galaxy is now effectively governing less than 30% of its former territory. The question before us is, what comes next? Daniel Lewis presented the diplomatic assessment. We have confirmation that 22 former council races are ready to form a new interstellar body. They're waiting for human leadership. And the EE founding races, Janet asked? Divided. Some recognize the need for change, others cling to the old power structure. Admiral Wilson, who had returned from his observation mission, offered the military perspective. The conflicts are worsening. Without a new framework for interstellar cooperation, we could be looking at a galaxy-wide war within another year. Janet took in all this information, then made her decision. It's time for Phase 3. Send word to all our diplomatic channels. Earth is ready to help establish a new galactic organization, not a replacement for the Council, but something better, a true partnership of equals. In his private observation post, Gregory Adams received the news with relief. For years, he had tried to warn the Council about underestimating humans. Now, as he prepared to join the human diplomatic team as an advisor, he reflected on the irony of the situation. The Council had feared human military power and had worked to contain it through regulations and restrictions. Yet in the end, it wasn't human weapons that brought down the mighty Galactic Council. It was simply their absence. By removing themselves from a dysfunctional system, humans had revealed just how essential they had become to galactic stability. As preparations began for the first meeting of what would eventually become the Galactic Assembly, Messages flowed to Earth from across the stars. Species that had never dared oppose the Council openly now expressed their hope for a more equitable future. Even some of the oldest races in the galaxy were beginning to acknowledge that age alone did not confer wisdom. Humanity had withdrawn from diplomacy, and the Galactic Council had indeed descended into chaos. But from that chaos, a new order was emerging, one built on mutual respect rather than ancient hierarchies. 5 years had passed since humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council. The galaxy had transformed in ways that few had predicted. The once mighty council now controlled barely a fifth of its former territory. Its grand chambers, built to house representatives from hundreds of worlds, now echoed with the voices of fewer than 50 species, mostly the ancient founding races and their closest allies. The neutral space station orbiting Tau Ceti had been constructed specifically for this historic occasion. It represented neither human nor council design, but something new, a collaborative effort by species from across the galaxy. Joseph Harris, Earth's new ambassador, stood by the viewing port of his ship as they approached the station. After 5 years of careful planning and patient diplomacy, the moment had arrived for humanity to formally re-engage with galactic society, but on very different terms. Nervous? Asked Richard Cooper, director of the Human Diplomatic Corps, who stood beside him. Joseph smiled slightly. Cautiously optimistic. The old council leadership fought against this meeting until the very end. The fact that it's happening at all is significant. They had little choice, Richard noted. With 3/4 of their former members either gone or aligned with us, they're facing irrelevance. Their ship docked at the station, where representatives from over 150 species awaited. Former council members, independent worlds, and even a small delegation from the remaining council itself. As Joseph prepared to disembark, he received a final message from President Janet Brown. Remember what brought us here. Not strength of arms, but strength of principle. Humanity's worth was always greater than the Council allowed. Today, the galaxy acknowledges that truth. The main conference chamber fell silent as the human delegation entered. Joseph took his place at the circular table, designed so that no position held prominence over others, a deliberate contrast to the Council's hierarchical arrangement. The head of the Council delegation, an ancient Helvari named Zoresh, the same speaker who had dismissed human concerns 5 years earlier, spoke. First, the Galactic Council extends greetings to humanity and all assembled representatives, he said formally. We are here to discuss a restoration of relations and humanity's return to the Council. Joseph smiled politely. Thank you for your greeting, Speaker Zoresh. However, I must correct a misunderstanding. We are not here to discuss humanity's return to the Council. We are here to establish the Galactic Assembly, a new body based on principles of equality and mutual respect. Zorash's expression hardened. The Council has stood for 50,000 years. It cannot simply be replaced because one young species found its policies inconvenient. A representative from the Cathara spoke up. The Council has failed, Speaker. 3 major wars in 5 years. Millions dead. Economic collapse across dozens of worlds. These are not signs of a successful system. From his position among the observers, Gregory Adams watched with satisfaction. The Zalarian anthropologist who had studied humans for decades had finally seen his warnings validated. The Council had underestimated humans until it was too late. Joseph continued. Humanity did not create this situation. We simply revealed the flaws that already existed by removing ourselves from an unfair system. Now we offer a solution. Not human dominance, but true partnership. Outside the station, the United Human Fleet held position at a respectful distance. Admiral Linda Rogers monitored the diplomatic proceedings from her flagship. The fleet wasn't there as a threat, but as a demonstration of what humanity had achieved during their isolation. Sensor readings confirm that the Council representatives are scanning our ships, her tactical officer reported. Linda nodded. Let them look. They need to understand that we advanced more in 5 years of freedom than in 50 years under their restrictions. Back in the conference chamber, Elizabeth Morris, Director of Human-Alien Cultural Exchange, presented the framework for the new Galactic Assembly. The Assembly recognizes the equal sovereignty of all spacefaring civilizations, she explained. Decisions affecting the galaxy will require true consensus, not merely the approval of the oldest species. Knowledge and technology will be shared equitably, not hoarded by a privileged few. She displayed a holographic map showing trade routes, scientific outposts, and defensive stations throughout human space and the territories of their allies. During our withdrawal, humanity established these cooperative networks with dozens of worlds. Together, we've achieved greater progress and stability than the Council managed in centuries. We invite all species to join this network as equals. Zorash and the other Council representatives listened with thinly veiled dismay. What they had dismissed as a temporary protest had evolved into an alternative to their entire system of governance. You speak of equality, Zorash said, yet humans clearly hold disproportionate influence in this assembly. Joseph shook his head. Our influence comes not from rules or tradition, but from the value we provide. Any species that contributes equally will have equal standing. A representative from one of the younger council races that had remained loyal to the old system spoke up hesitantly. The conflicts in former council space have damaged our economies and cost countless lives. What assurances do we have that this assembly will prevent such chaos? In response, Joseph activated a holographic display showing the humanitarian corridors, refugee assistance programs, and peacekeeping efforts that humans had maintained even during their withdrawal. While the Council debated, humanity acted. We've evacuated over 5 million civilians from conflict zones. We've established neutral medical facilities for all species. We've secured trade routes when Council protection failed. He looked directly at Zorash. We did this not to gain advantage, but because it was right. The Assembly will formalize these principles of mutual aid and protection. As the discussion continued, it became clear that most species had already made their decision. One by one, representatives rose to formally declare their support for the new Galactic Assembly. Even some of the remaining council members broke ranks to join. By the meeting's end, over 130 species had pledged to join the Assembly. The council delegation, reduced to just 15 members, finally recognized their position. The council acknowledges the will of the galaxy, Zorash said stiffly. We will consider your assembly proposal and determine our response. Joseph nodded respectfully. The assembly welcomes the council's participation, Speaker Zorash. We have much to learn from your ancient wisdom, just as you have much to learn from younger perspectives. As the historic session concluded, Gregory Adams approached Joseph. I spent decades trying to convince the council that they were underestimating humans, the Zolarian said. They never listened. Joseph smiled. And now they have no choice but to listen. By walking away, humanity accomplished what centuries of argument never could. You forced the galaxy to see its own flaws. Aboard the human flagship, Admiral Linda Rogers received confirmation that the Assembly Charter had been ratified. She turned to her crew. Send word to Earth, Phase 5 is complete. In her office on Earth, President Janet Brown received the news with quiet satisfaction. What had begun as a necessary withdrawal had transformed the political landscape of the galaxy. Not through force, but through the simple power of refusing to participate in an unfair system. The Assembly is formally established, her aide reported, 137 member species so far, with more expected to join within the month. Janet nodded. And the Council? Effectively dissolved, though they haven't formally admitted it yet. Most of their remaining members are already filing applications to join the Assembly. The President smiled. 5 years ago, they thought humanity would collapse without them. Instead, they collapsed without us. She looked out at the Washington skyline, considering the journey that had brought them to this moment. Humanity had withdrawn from diplomacy, and the Galactic Council had indeed descended into chaos. But from that chaos, a more just and equal system had emerged. Sometimes walking away was the most powerful move of all.